it pains me so deeply to know that I could do something to at least minimize somebody's suffering by 5%, and to not do that, that feels like I'm trivializing what I went through. I actually had a really cool experience last weekend. You know Salim from Sound?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we had his birthday. We did one of these sound ceremonies that we've done several times. Do you know David and you know Allison Berger?
I know Allison.
Yeah,
I've heard of these sound ceremonies, but I haven't been to one.
Amazing, right? So it's MDMA and psilocybin. It's like a 7-hour journey. And this last one we did last weekend, I had this moment in mind where the veil dropped and I saw like my spirit guides, but they looked like us. They were just like regular people.
Yeah.
And they could tell that I could see them. And they were like, whoa, you're not supposed to be able to see us. And so they basically told me that I'm like their boss in a way, that they were assigned me.
Yeah.
And so there's this whole team like working on my behalf. And it hit me in that moment, like, I am the shittiest boss ever. Like I'm down here complaining about things, that things aren't happening fast enough, and dealing with overwhelm and thinking it's all on me and I need to figure it all out. Meanwhile, this whole team is like working
ready
on
to support. Yeah.
And so we had this like meeting together. I'm like, I'm really sorry, guys. I have not been treating you the way you should be treated as a team. Awesome. And from now on, I promise I'm going to have more faith in you.
Wow.
So it was really cool.
Wow. Let's talk about this in the show.
Yeah, for sure, man.
We always we're recording right now. Okay. Well, welcome to the show. Sorry, you guys just had to be thrown into a conversation, but we're going to keep that because it's candid, it's authentic, and this is just us doing what we do. We just get deep really quickly, and it's hard not to when you care about the type of stuff that we talk about, which is like this inner work, this perspective of how we can live happier lives with more freedom and more understanding and more self-awareness. So welcome to the show.
And that's the way you show up in the world, man. I really want to honor you for that, because the first time we met, we immediately went in deep. And I really appreciated that about you, because it's so easy to just like stay in the surface stuff, especially the first time you meet somebody. It's awkward. It could be, you could be nervous. Like, how am I looking? What are they thinking of me? All this stuff. But you just like went right in. You were just so warm, so welcome, so inviting. And I just really appreciate that about you, man.
Oh, well, thank you. I received that, and I appreciate you saying that. So hopefully we can continue this conversation on this episode. So I'm going to do something awkward for my guests, and I'm going to introduce you and read your bio to you while you sit there and take it.
Awesome.
It's almost like singing happy birthday to somebody where you don't know what to do. You're just sitting there like, I'm receiving this like awkwardly. So
happy birthday always seems so depressing when people sing it too. Happy birthday. So I'm like, what? I thought I loved the person. Why am I singing like that? Anyways.
Bianca has a really great, I've got a really great story about Bianca. For her birthday a couple of years ago, or actually last year, all of our group of friends sang happy birthday to her, and she just starts like dancing to it and like twerking to it, and like I'd never seen somebody like take and receive that energy and just move it
into the body.
Yeah, just receive it. Awesome. It was really cool, really cool. But yeah, I'm gonna go through your bio right now and do my best to encapsulate you in a few words, but obviously you're so much more than this, so let's give it a try. So Jason, also known as JG, is an award-winning entrepreneur, a TEDx speaker, a former rapper who opened up for the Wu-Tang Clan, and previously a man who used to weigh 332 pounds and has since lost over 130 pounds. He's a mental performance and leadership coach for celebrities, changemakers, and CEOs. He is also the host of the Jason Goldberg is Ruining Podcasting podcast, author of the #1 international bestseller on self-leadership entitled Prison Break, and creator of the Playful Prosperity and Competition-Proof Business Immersion programs. JG has been featured as an expert on media outlets including ABC, CBS, and Fox, as well as teaching on the Mind Valley and Soul Pancake platforms.
I'm about to start twerking in a minute, just so you know.
I'm waiting for you to.
Sorry, Mom.
Sorry, everyone. And has founded multiple startups, including one in partnership with NASA and the Space Shuttle program. He now focuses on blending his signature mix of simple and transformational wisdom, captivating storytelling, practical business mentorship, and belly-busting humor to make personal growth less personal growthy and to leave everyone experiencing at least 5% more joy than when he found them. Welcome.
Nicely done. Thank you very much. I don't know. It feels weird. Like it's almost like this is your life. I feel like I should be in a coffin and like listening to this as like a eulogy kind of thing. 100%.
Well, even if you were to spontaneously pass away, you would leave quite a legacy from the sounds of it. And I can't wait to, well, hopefully that doesn't happen on the show.
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
that would be tragic, but.
Great for ratings. No,
you know, I don't know if I'd publish it, honestly.
Good call, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you've done a lot just given this, bio, and you've done so much more than that. And like I said, it's always really difficult to encapsulate people with words. And I always go based off of energy, and how you make somebody feel is really what people remember, not what you've accomplished or not what you've done, but really how you leave people feeling. And you seem to have made this your mission of making people feel 5% better than when you found them. So I would love to get into how you got into this work, what were the events that kind of catalyzed this person that I see today?
Yeah, I mean, trauma. I mean,
I knew it.
It's all trauma based. Like, there's no like inspiring story of like, I was sitting in my bed one night and I just knew I needed to help people. That was trauma. So I was raised by a single Jewish mother, so she can hear everything we're saying all the way in Florida right now. She's probably on your payroll. And so never met my dad. My dad actually left my mom when she was pregnant. Like, he told her when she got pregnant, have an abortion or I'm leaving. And she was told she couldn't have kids. So to me, I was like a miracle child that she got, pregnant. So she told him, no, I'm not having an abortion. He left and never turned back, never saw a picture of him, never talked to him, nothing. So it was always just me and mom. And mom is a hustler. She works her butt off still to this day. She's 73 years old. She's badass. She went back at 70 and got a life coaching certification. Wow. She's like really, really on top of it. But it was a
Somebody
struggle.
That's actually qualified to be a life coach.
Right. Who's actually been through life.
The audacity of the 21-year-old life coach. I wish I had that level of confidence.
Yeah, I got to work on my own arrogance levels. I don't have enough arrogance in that area of my life for sure. And based on how she was raised, she brought a lot of anxiety and depression and sadness and despair into the household. And since it was just the two of us, just like if you're raised in a household that speaks Spanish, you speak Spanish. You're not dumb for not speaking French. You just were raised with Spanish. So I was raised with a lot of victimhood. And so that became kind of my default way of being in the world. And, who can I blame and really not taking personal responsibility for many areas of my life. And so from a very young age, because I became the chubby kid really early on. By like first grade, I was already chubby. By 15, when I was in high school, I was 250 pounds. And, kids are really loving at 15. They would never make fun of you because of how you look and all that stuff. And so I needed to feel some kind of way to feel enough, to feel valuable, like to feel like I really had some kind of value in the world, because it's very hard to think you have value when people are picking on you and saying all these things. So what I realized was that by cultivating my gifts of humor and making people laugh with me, they wouldn't laugh at me. Mm-hmm. And by cultivating a gift of empathy and listening, I could feel connection to people, and they weren't getting that from people my age, like especially girls. They weren't getting listened to and really seen and heard, and so I would do that. And so it became a thing where the humor and the empathy became kind of a crutch for me to feel connection, to feel enough. And so that was kind of like how I was as a kid. Mm-hmm. I got into tech really early. I was into computers and stuff. I was a computer geek. And so I got into IT stuff. I was in technology for 15 years, IT consulting for the last 7 or so years of that. Had a couple of startups. Once I left corporate, one of them was the one with NASA. And then I got into coaching and speaking about 10 years ago, like 2013. And the reason I wanted to bring that up is because what I realized was that the thing that started off as this crutch and this defense mechanism and this way to feel enough is now the essence of what I do for a living. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, if I didn't have that time of having to cultivate humor and empathy, I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing now. So that's kind of the route of how I got here in a really short nutshell.
Wow. That's incredible. Thanks for sharing, first and foremost, because I'm sure many people can relate to the story of being the one who was picked on, or the one that didn't feel like he belonged or fit in or had self-worth. I know I can. I very much relate to that story, even if mine didn't manifest physically into like weight gain. Mm-hmm. It manifested internally as like achievement. Like I get my value through achievement. Right. And that's what's going to give me a sense of belonging or a sense of importance or validation. Right. Yep. So I can very much relate to that. So thanks for sharing. And also want to touch on what you mentioned, how that, that experience really formed you and you learned how to adapt to overcome that situation. You didn't let it beat you down to the point where it broke you. You actually took it and transmuted it into something good and allowed people to feel good around you, which is that's a gift. That is a real talent and gift to have. So it's not something that comes with ease. I mean, maybe for some people it is, but you can tell when somebody's been through pain. You can immediately sense because of their level of compassion and their level of empathy that they have for other people. And right away I can sense it with you just from the way you operate and the energy that you bring into a room. So
thank you for that, man. I appreciate that. And it's interesting that you bring that up too, because that last piece, especially because, we were saying earlier, and I was telling you my one-line life plan / one-line business plan is to leave everybody I meet with at least 5% more joy than I found them. And I like to use that one outwardly because what I'm kind of known for is being the playful, joyful, whatever, all that stuff, right? Which I love. The truth of the matter is that as much as I love to leave people with at least 5% more joy than I found them, my real thing is that I want to leave them with at least 5% less suffering than when I found them, because that's the thing that I never want to see recreated in people's lives in the way that I experienced it. I think some level of suffering is actually okay, but I'm talking about the excess level of suffering, the self-imposed level of suffering, all the suffering I had for the first 30 years of my life, and that I still have. I still have suffering on a regular basis because I'm a human having a human condition. But the undue suffering and not knowing how to actually move through that and having that manifest as anxiety for me and depression and suicidal ideation into my late 20s and getting up to 330 pounds, like all those things, it pains me so deeply to know that I could do something to at least minimize somebody's suffering by 5%, and to not do that, that feels like I'm trivializing what I went through.
Yeah. And it's so interesting to look back through the lens of, your challenges really shape you, inform you, and are offering you a lesson or a gift in just wrapped up in the ball of shit. It's like inside of it, there's like a gold nugget. Yeah. And all you have to do is look through the light, look through the right perspective back at it. And I can relate to that so much of being, raised in the environment that I was raised in, feeling like an outsider, feeling like I didn't belong, being a Hare Krishna in the deep South, and having to navigate those conversations as a young kid and didn't know how to defend my beliefs or even have the language around explaining my beliefs. It was just what I was taught and who I was, and didn't know any different. But really brought me in my shell and created a wall between me and everybody else, because it felt like who I was wasn't accepted, or who I was wasn't understood. So I was like, okay, I'll just get really good at playing the part of making people like me for other reasons in ways that I know they will like me. So humor was one of my outlets as well. Achievement, being intellectual, that was a strong one for me, was like, okay, I'll just pride myself on my intellect. And what happens is when you do that, you separate yourself from the body and really allow yourself to feel the things that you're running away from or dismissing or avoiding, and living so much in your head that you have this disconnect of being a fully embodied person, of like marrying the intellect, the logic with the feeling, the heart-centeredness. So that was a journey for me, but at the same time, looking back at those difficult moments and challenges, it's what allows me to be who I am today, and has given me context of how to approach everyone with compassion, even if they don't live the same way as me. And I don't necessarily agree with their views. It doesn't matter. They're still a human having a human experience, and I can relate to that, and I can appreciate them for who they are. And we don't have to have this battle back and forth of I'm right, you're wrong. And we can both peacefully coexist and still understand one another.
Yeah, the us versus them mentality runs rampant in our society, especially here in the States, but all over the world. And I think that alone, just the word my causes more undue suffering in this world than I think any other word. My life, my beliefs, my way of doing things. It's because when I'm so focused on then I notice that everything feels like a threat to me. Right? Because if my beliefs are the most important, then your beliefs are a threat to me. But if we take the word my out of it and it's just life, right? It's like not my ocean, it's the ocean, right? So what if it's just like the life? And now I don't see as much of the separation. I don't see the us versus them. I see over there's a small wave in the ocean, and over here there's a huge wave in the ocean, but it's still just the ocean. And that's okay. And that wave over there doesn't damage this wave over here, and vice versa. And neither of them damage the ocean from which they came. So the more we can really like slow down and zoom out of that and really like look at the ocean of life and of consciousness as its own thing, I think it's a lot easier for us to have that level of compassion that you've cultivated so well.
So what do you see as a coach? Obviously, you've worked with many high-level CEOs, change makers, celebrities. I mean, what are some of the common patterns in your book here? I love this title, Prison Break, and the imagery here is sunglasses with prison window, basically a prison window, and the other one an open road.
Yep.
Looks like, gives me the feeling of freedom.
Yep, exactly.
Right? And you said, vanquish the victim, own your obstacles, and lead your life. So vanquish the victim. Yeah. I want to focus on that.
Yeah, I mean, because it was my way of being. It was my default way of being for the first 30 years of my life, right? It's like I had two big mantras growing up and into my late 20s. The first one was, who can I blame, right? That was just no personal responsibility. And the other one was, that's just the way I am. Right. So I was married at one point. I'm divorced now, but I remember I would get super angry. I had major anger problems growing up. I was like the kid that in high school that would punch holes in walls. And if somebody cut me off in traffic, I would like chase them. But then I was a total wuss. If I actually caught up to them, I wouldn't do anything. I would just I was so hijacked by my anger. And I remember my ex-wife saying to me one day when I got mad at somebody for cutting me off in traffic, she's like, why do you do that? Why do you get so mad when people like just cut you off in traffic? What's the big deal? And I said, that's just the way I am. I can't control it. That's just the way I am. And that's what I ended up calling my 6-word death sentence, right? That's just the way I am is a death sentence. You're done. You may as well just like phone it in. You're finished. And so this recognition, and I talk about it in the first chapter of the book, when I really got the wake up call of how my victimhood and what I call in the book prisoner, like that's the prisoner perspective, being a victim, being a prisoner of circumstance, that I have to mold and modify and manipulate the people and the situations and everything around me in order to be happy, which is an exhausting full-time job that I do not want to be employed by. To really understand that I play a very significant role in my victimhood, and noticing that it's not true that circumstance is what affects my experience of life. It's the seriousness with which I take the circumstances that are happening in my life. It's the level of significance I put on the thoughts in my head, how much I attach to the emotions I'm having in that moment. So the presence of those things are not what caused me suffering. It's me taking those things seriously that causes me suffering. So that's really what the book is about.
Yeah, it's your perception of the events.
Absolutely.
Right? It's the events by themselves they might undoubtedly have or create pain, which is part of this human experience. But again, like you said, the suffering is the mental anguish that we put on top of the pain that exists, right? That we can either continue to perpetuate by feeding a narrative, by looking for evidence to perpetuate this story or belief that we have. Like for you, it was, that's just the way I am.
Right.
That relieves all self-accountability and places responsibility on external events, right? And you have to suffer from that because you're the one that's affected by it, getting angry when something trivial like somebody cuts you off, happens.
Right.
So, but if you can reframe that and look back through it with a different perspective and a different meaning, then it vanishes, the emotional reactivity from it. Yeah,
it really does. And that's been a long road for me to get. I mean, when I first got into personal growth and what really got me into personal growth, it was 2009. I was director of engineering and operations for this IT consulting firm, doing really well in my late 20s, making well over 6 figures, married, had the house, the car, all these things. I tried to make a purchase on Amazon one morning from my office, from my corporate job, and my card got declined. And it wasn't like a huge purchase. It was like $50 or $60. My card got declined, and it was my bank card. So I knew there was cash in the bank. So I tried again, gets declined again. And this is where my anger just like goes through the roof. I'm like, I can't believe this is happening. Why is my card not working? I'm super pissed off. So I slam open the door of my office and I storm out the lobby of the building, and I call the bank, and I'm, mashing the 0 button to get a live person. I'm just boiling mad. And I finally get this guy on the phone, super sweet guy named Steven. I still remember his name. He was such a sweetheart, but I'm like yelling and mad and I'm like, why isn't my card working? He does a little typing and he goes, sir, I'm so sorry. It looks like there was some potentially fraudulent activity on the account, so we deactivated your card. To which most people would be like, thank you so much. Thanks for looking out for me. Not me, because I was a rageaholic. So I got even more mad, and I'm yelling and screaming like, did somebody hack my account? Like, what's going on? And I said, what were the fraudulent charges? He types a little more. He comes back and he says, well, sir, it looks like there were 4 fast food transactions in one day. And so our system flagged that because oftentimes when people steal cards, they'll make small purchases to see if the card's been cut off before they make a bigger purchase. And unfortunately, that had actually been me. I had eaten at 4 fast food restaurants in one day. This is when I'm at 332 pounds and everything is attached to food. If I'm bored, I eat. If I'm sad, I eat. If I'm anxious, I eat. If I celebrate, I eat, right? It was all based around that. And so that was really the day where it wasn't the first wake-up call I had. I had been overweight my entire life. It wasn't like that day I was like, oh my gosh, I need to change something. Like I knew. But that was the first time, for whatever reason, that I couldn't find somebody else to blame. It was that moment where I said, it's not my genetics. It's not the fact that I have a crazy work schedule. It's not that I live in Florida and it's too hot to go outside and exercise. And so I sit inside and watch TV all the time. It was simply personal responsibility. I just hadn't really looked at my life in that area of my life to really get sincere about attacking that. And that was the turning point for me. The name of the chapter is called The Day the Universe Cut Me Off.
Wow. And it's just something like I want to explore this further because I've coached countless clients. I mean, I don't know how many people like exactly have gone through my coaching programs, but it's fitness programs. But I also always try to integrate more holistic styles of coaching in there to help marry the entire picture, not just the physical component or just the nutritional component. And oftentimes people already know what they need to do. They know.
Right.
But there's something else that is inhibiting them from actually doing the things that they know they could be doing to solve their own problems.
Yep.
So as a mental coach, how do you approach something like that?
Well, so much that is identity based, right? It's to me, it's so much identity based. So one of the things I do all the time with my clients, and this is a thing I do on myself at least once a day, if not multiple times a day. So I have this bracelet, the My Intent bracelets, Chris's company. So I'll tell you what it says here in a second. But the way I look at it is like this. Imagine you've seen some of the Batman movies, I'm guessing at some point, right? Who's the Batman you think of, like actor-wise, when you think of Batman?
Christian Bale.
Okay, cool. All right, so we'll use Christian Bale. So imagine that you are the director of Batman with Christian Bale. You're on set. He does a scene. He's doing his whole Batman thing. You yell cut. You're talking to the crew and getting ready for the next scene. And you happen to look over and you see him pacing back and forth in the set, like looking really stressed out. So he's your star. You want to make sure he's okay. So you walk up to him. You go, hey, man, what's going on? You look stressed out. And he goes, Nimai, I don't know, man. Like, what if I can't beat the Joker? What if my tech isn't strong enough? What if the people of Gotham die and it's all my fault? How am I supposed to live with that, man? What do I do? And you're looking at him like, what the fuck is he talking about? Like we're shooting a movie, right? But you want to be supportive. You want to be compassionate. And so you have a couple choices. Number one, you can say, okay, Batman, let's figure out how to make your tech strong enough so you can beat the Joker.
Yeah.
Or you can remind him that he's Christian Bale playing the role of Batman, and that before he put on that suit and before he went to hair and makeup and before he drove to the set, he was at home with his family, living his Christian Bale life. And when I have that understanding that I'm not Batman, but I'm playing the role of Batman, and I really can get into this space where I will call out that role, right? I'll say it out loud. I want to name who it is that has the problem. Because when I say I am overwhelmed, right? I have now said that my identity is somebody who's overwhelmed. There is no separation between the feeling of overwhelm and who I am. They are now inextricably linked. So the first thing I want to do is I want to ask myself, who is the one that actually has the problem? I'm saying but who's the one that's noticing I have the problem if I'm the one that has the problem, right? So who's the one that has the problem? And so to separate myself out, I will say it out loud. You can do it in your head, but I say it out loud. I will say, today I am playing the role of Jason, the overwhelmed entrepreneur that thinks this new project should be moving along faster. Like that is the role that I'm playing. And dude, I am Oscar winning. Like I am so good at playing that role. There's nobody who can play that role better than me. So I call that out and I say, the one who's having the problem right now is the role, Jason, the overwhelmed entrepreneur who thinks this project should be moving along faster. So then I ask myself, I say, okay, what does it feel like right here, right now, sitting just for this moment, not for the next 5 minutes, 10 minutes, not tomorrow, not next week. How does it feel right here, right now, without an attachment to that role? Not getting rid of the role, not reframing it, not doing anything like that. The role's allowed to be there. It's a role that I was happy to take on. How do I feel? What's my experience of life right here, right now, without an attachment to that role, without putting significance on the presence of that role? and I check in, and 100% of the time, I feel at least a sliver of peace start to show up. And so the question becomes, let's say that Batman's problems are real things that do need to be attended to. Because I'm not saying notice that this is an identity and it's a role you're playing and then just forget about all your responsibilities. Yeah, pretend it doesn't exist. Which version of me is going to be best suited to help Batman with his problems? The one who thinks I am Batman and the success or failure of Batman's problems are literally make my life at risk? Or the peaceful, non-identified version that can look at Batman as a separate entity and say, I'm here to help you with that. And so that's why on my bracelet, it literally says not Batman. And it's my reminder to me that at any given moment when I'm getting super stressed or overwhelmed or anxious, that I have now forgotten that I am Jason playing this role. And I think that my actual experience is who I am.
Wow. That's powerful.
It works, man. Yeah, it's just effective for me.
Yeah. Yeah. That's such a powerful technique of really depersonalizing the attachment that you have to the role that you've played. And like you said, like you can choose your character at any moment.
Right.
And you've just been really good at practicing this one character your entire life.
Yep.
Which is why you're married to it. It's
right. Exactly.
It's who I was yesterday. It only makes sense to be that person today.
Absolutely.
And that shift can be subtle. It can be overnight. I mean, people can have identity shifts overnight and never look back. You know, there's plenty of stories of that, but I would assert that most people cannot or don't have the conviction to do that. Even if you want to, you know, you could, it's hard to follow through with it because of the practice.
You nailed it. That's the thing, though. That's all it is. It's a willingness to practice. It's not about skill. It's not about aptitude. It's not about history. It's not about your story or your family or your genetics. It's about a willingness to be in the practice. Because imagine it would be insane to think about being in a movie where you're cast as a bank robber, right? And because in a bank robber, when they're cast in a movie as a bank robber, they don't walk gingerly into the bank and say, "Hi, everybody. Anybody want to give me some cash?" And the gun, no, I don't know. I don't need this. Don't worry about that. No, you kick in the door and you scream and yell and you wave the gun in people's faces. You tell them to get on the ground and give you the money. Now imagine you played that role and then you went home to your family and did the same thing to them. You kicked in the door and started waving a gun in there. You would never do that because you're so clear as an actor, that role starts and ends on the set. And when I go home back to my life, I am who I actually am again. So the more we can practice that, just getting that little space in between. This is why we meditate. This is why people do psychedelics. This is why people do drugs recreationally, is to get space between who they are and what they think.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say that. It's the pause.
It's the pause.
It's the pause in between the thoughts. It's the pause in between the flooding of emotions that you experience whenever you get activated, and the slight pause to say, like, what's happening here? You know, what's triggering me here? Or just the breath to, like, if you can get into the practice of doing that, just asking yourself questions, what's happening here? Or what is this teaching me? Or I'm feeling things. What's the feeling? What's underneath the feeling? I mean, it is a game-changing skill to have, but it requires practice, and it's not easy by any means. I mean, ask anybody that is in the middle of a fit to just, hey, stop what you're doing, stop how you're feeling, and feel the opposite of it. Feel peace when you feel angry, or feel peace whenever you feel sad, or feel happiness. You know, it's like it starts with a slow but steady climb up the emotional ladder, which all begins with the pause, right? It's the awareness. So absolutely. I always like to think of, like, and this is a technique that I've used in conflict with Bianca or with any relationship, is when I notice myself experiencing those, the first thing is to name it, like, oh, I'm feeling X, I'm feeling frustrated, I'm feeling this. And instead of focusing on the negativity or the negative feeling, I ask myself, what's one, maybe not the jump from feeling frustrated to feeling ecstatic, that's too big of a jump for me, but what's feeling frustrated to feeling neutral look like? So what's something neutral that I can think of in this moment that'll separate me from the intensity of the experience right now? And that's something simple like my cats. I'm like, okay, my cats are neutral in this situation. Like, I like my cats. They make me happy. I just think of them and they make me smile. And that little bit of a gap is like, okay, I feel a little bit better right now than what I did just a second ago. And that makes that jump from being fully activated to fully peaceful a little bit easier.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and you nailed it. So like this is so much of what I believe in, is that I really believe that in order to level up, you have to lighten up. Right. And it feels so heavy to be a human sometimes. And so the way I talk about this a lot is if you picture a hot air balloon, right? And hot air balloons there's nothing good about a hot air balloon on the ground. They're meant to be in the air, right? That's what they're there for. And so there's a little pull string, you pull the pull string, the fire goes up in the balloon, and that's what brings it up, right? But if you still have those sandbags that are all around the basket that are meant to hold it on the ground until it's ready to go up, you can pull that ripcord all day and you may get off the ground a little bit, but you're burning all of your energy to do so. Mm-hmm. Whereas instead, if you were to gently just take the sandbags and drop them off the side, which we can talk about how to do that, but to drop them off the side, the hot air balloon ascends. That's what it was designed to do. Mm-hmm. It needs very little of the power, because once it catches some wind and these sandbags aren't holding it down, it just ascends. And the same thing happens with us. I mean, you know this very well from all of your work. You put pressure on the muscles, they grow. Mm-hmm. You put too much pressure on the mind and the soul, it shrinks, right? So we need to have some lightened up way that we loosen our grip on the tightness that we often have on reality and on our thoughts and on our emotions. And then we'll more naturally rise up our level of consciousness, which is exactly what you do, like picturing the cats, right? That's you lightening up. And when you do that, it's almost like the old Snickers commercials. I don't know if you remember these, where people are like really irritable and then they eat a Snickers. Yourself, right? You're not yourself. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But as soon as they eat, they're like, oh, I'm good, right? Yeah. The same thing happens when we can allow our consciousness to just kind of settle, allow our minds to settle. And I have a really great trick for that if you want me to go through it. Then all of a sudden you start seeing opportunities for how you can go up in your level of consciousness even more, how you can solve the problems that are going on in your world. But none of that can happen from that low level of consciousness. Like Einstein says, you can't solve a problem from the same level of thinking that created it. You have to ascend that level of thinking.
So I would love to hear the practice.
Yeah. So so I'm a big meditator, right? So I meditate every morning, 30 minutes. As soon as I wake up, it's like wake up, pee, right back in bed, 30 minutes, because then I'm kind of still in theta and I'm a little more impressionable, and it's oftentimes just quiet meditation. But what I also know to be true is that there are plenty of times throughout the day where I get sped up, right? At least that's the way I call it. Like I get sped up, and sped up to me means my thoughts start racing. I start trying to control my thoughts. I start judging my thoughts. I start condemning and doing all these things to myself, which are not helpful and not productive. But I don't have 15 or 20 or 30 minutes to sit for a meditation, and I want to have some kind of shift. Here's what I do. And I do it physically, but you can do it in your head as well. Think about a snow globe. You know, snow globes So if you were standing in the middle of a snow globe and you shook it up and there'd be snow flying all around you, and you can't even see like your hand in front of your face, that's what it feels like. At least for me sometimes when I'm really caught up or I'm really overwhelmed, I'm really stressed out, it feels like I'm in the middle of a shaken up snow globe and all this snow's flying around me. And then me, being the well-intentioned, type A, ambitious person I am, says, okay, well, all I have to do is get every single piece of snow and put it on the ground myself, and then I'll be peaceful again. And so I'm running all around trying to solve this and get rid of this thought and get rid of this emotion. And as I'm running around, I'm just kicking up all the snow that I just put on the ground. But what do you actually have to do with a snow globe that's been shaken up to get the snow to get back to the ground again?
He's going to be still and wait.
You just set it down and it's going to do its own thing, right? Yeah. It's just naturally the way the system works. So the exercise, which can take you 30 seconds to a minute, is either get a real snow globe if you can, or just picture it in your head, is shake up a snow globe. Let's just say you're visualizing it. Shake up a snow globe in your head, watch all the snow flying around, and pick one piece of snow in the snow globe and watch it. And it's going to move around on its own, and it catches a little bit of water and then moves this way and swirls around, and then eventually, boom, it hits the ground. And then I pick another piece of snow and I watch that one, and it's moving all around in its own little path. Nothing for me to do. I'm not responsible for it. I don't have to change it. I don't have to judge it. It hits the ground. And if you do that for 30 seconds, just follow a few pieces of snow, you can't help but have your nervous system calm down a little bit. And then you can look at using the tools to actually take action and move things forward.
This is great. I love that. That just the visual of it helps me kind of think of how I'm going to do that in the future.
Yeah. It's helpful, man.
Yeah.
Takes a minute and you're good.
Yeah. But what about, okay, so this is more moment to moment stuff we're talking about.
Yeah.
What about the deeper, more maybe subconscious perspectives that we have on life? Maybe the stories that we've told ourselves or the stories that we've created based off of our life experience that if we look backwards through that lens, have all the evidence to support that belief. Like, how do you get to the deep belief which can create profound change?
Yeah, and the thing there is that it's still a simple fundamental misunderstanding. So the imagination, whether it's future focused or trying to truly in a reality-based way have a recollection of what happened, because whatever we think happened in the past, every time there's an old saying, every time you take your story off the shelf, you bastardize it a little bit more. Like every time you go back through and go revisit the story, something changes in the details. So you actually don't even know what really is true anymore. And so just understanding that I'm working off of a flawed premise, even if I think I have evidence. Because the evidence I have is also a story that I can't actually have any reality with. Like I remember I was sitting with, you know, Byron Katie. You're familiar with Byron Katie's work at all? So she's one of my top 3 spiritual teachers. She's amazing. And I remember I was in a little thing with her in Rhinebeck, upstate New York, at Omega Institute. And she asked all of us in the room, she said, who here has eaten a banana? And like everybody in the room raised their hand. And she said, prove it. And we could all describe bananas, what they taste like, what they look like, even maybe when we had them before, but we couldn't actually prove to her that it's so clear, it's so real in our head, and yet we can't actually prove it. And so anytime I'm looking back at these things, first of all, the evidence I have is probably not as accurate as I think it is, first of all. Second of all, the evidence is actually more clear in the other direction. And what I mean by that is I believe that 99% of anxiety, at least for myself and for a lot of the people I've worked with, comes from the belief that there is a future where I will not be okay, right? If I knew, when I was born, if my mom was given a list and said, here are all the exact trials and tribulations Jason's going to go through with the exact dates, how long he's going to be down for, all these things, it wouldn't mean that as I grew up, those things wouldn't sting, but I would be like, well, it's here, June 17th, 2022. Like I'm supposed to have a shitty, depressing 2 weeks. All right, cool. And then I'm going to be great again. Then I'd have no anxiety. I would just be with the experience, right? So if I look at that story, that there's some kind of story that I wouldn't be okay in the future, let me look at the real evidence. There's nothing that we've been through that we haven't gotten through, because we're here having this conversation right now. So if you want to look at evidence, look at the actual evidence of how your life has gotten to where you are now, and that if you didn't have the level of resilience and resourcefulness that's innate to you, you would not be where you are now. That's the evidence I want to pay attention to.
Yeah, and that completely shifts you from the victim mentality.
Absolutely.
Right? Because you're like, oh, these things actually I'm the beneficiary of these challenging moments because I've grown through them and I've developed a skill or the tenacity or the resilience which has then created drive in me to experience the equal and opposite feeling that I went through.
Absolutely.
Right? And like the
That's
really
exactly
dark
right.
moments that inspires the desire for the really great moments. Right. And it's that contrast that really, it's the human experience. Like the human experience is the full spectrum of emotions. It's not just good.
Right.
It's not just the
100%.
the pleasant ones. It's also the unpleasant ones, because that is what creates us to adapt.
Yeah.
Or like it forces us to adapt. Right. It's
Absolutely.
like either get beaten down to the point where you give up, or you pick yourself up and keep going.
Yeah. Yeah. And and that's really interesting too. And this is kind of, if you look at it from a kind of a slightly more spiritual perspective, depending what your beliefs are, I don't really think that anybody truly knows how we got here. There's a lot of science and stuff that tries to explain it. Science is great at trying to explain things, reporting on life as opposed to actually creating life. So nobody really knows how we got here. It's kind of a miracle. I mean, if we look around, like, this is kind of ridiculous that we're like, in these meat suits on a floating rock spinning through space. Could be a simulation, who knows? But we have no idea how we got here. So if it's a miracle for us to exist, then shouldn't every kind of situation or occurrence within this miracle that was created also be a miracle? Like the unpleasant and the pleasant things, if they are a part of what is miraculous, then they too should be miraculous. If you're cooking a Mexican dish, you put Mexican ingredients into the dish. You don't put French ingredients into the dish and hope that it tastes Mexican. So if the Mexican dish had to have been made up of Mexican ingredients, then the miracle of life should be made up of nothing but miracle ingredients. And so that's a harder one sometimes to wrap our head around, because again, we're looking at the threat to my life and what I want to happen and my preferences. But just looking at that and being willing to tease that out, that can be nice to see that this is nothing, it's not personal. Like the stuff that's happened to us. And believe me, I take crap personally all the time that happens to me. How dare they do this to me? Or I can't believe this happened to me. This is so unfair. Again, I'm not immune to any of this stuff. The transformation for me is that the window of time from the time I get triggered to the time I realize that to the time I move out of it gets smaller and smaller. That's transformation.
Yeah, exactly. I 100% agree with you. It's not this type of like inner work is not the understanding that it's going to go away. It's more of your ability to respond rather than react to these things that are going to inevitably happen in your life. And if you go into it with the understanding that, hey, this is something that I'm going through, I'm going to get through it, and maybe even one day be thankful that I went through it, because if I can look back at my life and some of the more challenging moments that I can identify as being like really, really painful and hard, I wouldn't be who I am today without those. And I'm really grateful for my life that I have today. And who's to say that if I didn't experience that, I wouldn't be in this position?
Absolutely.
So you have to take I don't even want to label as good with the bad, but it's like, that's also a label that you give to things, but it just is, like, everything just is. It's the association or the meaning that you give it. So why not try on for size? Just try it on, looking back and seeing some of the more painful events in your life, and try it on, see how it feels. Maybe it's something actually good that happened. Maybe there's a lot of good that came from it, as painful as it may have been. I'm not invalidating that experience, but what if you were to shift? Like, it's in the past, it's not going to change, but your feelings about it can change.
Right.
And your life is dictated by how you feel, right? Your life is happening now, and it's dictated by how you feel now. So how can you take that and apply it in the moment when something's happening now, something challenging is happening now?
I call that turning your fuck yous to thank yous. Right. It starts off as like, oh, fuck you, I can't believe this happened. Screw you, God or universe or ex-partner or business partner or boss, and finding how you can turn those from fuck yous to thank yous. And sometimes it takes time, but it's always there.
Yeah. And how can you put that into practice? I'm just curious to hear your ideas of, like, obviously you're a coach. And you, like I said, you've worked with some pretty successful people. What are some of the common pitfalls that people, even that have more material, traditional, I guess, forms of success with like money and wealth and power and all these things, like, they're still human? What are some of the common pitfalls that you see?
It's actually the same across the board. Like, literally, it doesn't matter how traditionally successful they are or how much money they have or anything else. It all boils down to the same stuff, right? It's all health, wealth, and relationships are the stuff people are typically suffering with. And to me, those all come back to not understanding the way the equipment works, right? There are two kinds of people in the world. There's the one like me that when I buy a new gadget and I get it home, I rip it open, I throw away everything that's instruction manual related, and I just start tinkering with the thing. But inevitably I miss out on features and functions. And that's why when they have a 7 iPhone hacks you didn't know, I'm like, cool, I'm going to watch that video because I obviously never read the instructions. And then there are the people that open the thing, and of course they have like the perfect cutter to get the thing perfectly open, and they get the instructions and they won't touch the thing until they read through all the instructions. Those people, it takes longer, it may be a little more tedious, but they really get how the equipment works. We don't do that with our minds. We brought it home, we ripped it open, we threw away the instructions, said, we're just going to screw with it and see what happens, which is great. There's nothing wrong with that. But if I really want to be able to feel more joy and feel more peace and feel more love and feel more creativity and feel all these things, it's really helpful to know how the equipment works. So the thing that I see across the board that comes up with pretty much every client is, number one, the identity stuff, right? So the stuff we're talking about with Not Batman, but also the fact that whatever projection we create about reality, we will be responding to that projection, right? So if I believe, oh my God, there's, everything's going wrong and the other shoe's going to drop at any moment, then I'm responding to the projection that the shoe is about to drop at any moment, and I'm hypervigilant and I'm scared and I'm anxious and I'm tense. But I have to respond that way. That's the projection that I've created. So getting people to understand, number one, or to see for themselves and explore where they're creating projections that are creating the circumstances that they are in the way they're responding, right? Like really responding to a projection that's coming from a flawed premise, flawed information, shifting the identity stuff, doing the Batman stuff. And the biggest thing is to understand you don't have to work with the content of your thinking, right? And what I mean by that is it's so common, and it's helpful too. This is not saying it's not helpful. It's so common to look at the content of your thought and then try to reframe it and try to make it into the silver lining, try to make it into a positive. So now I'm working with the content of thought. By working with the content of thought, I'm giving the content of thought significance. I'm saying that the content of my thought is what's causing me the stress right now. So obviously you can see, like, if you reframe that, it can make you feel better. That's great. There's nothing wrong with that. What I'm saying is that if we want to get to the root of it, just reframing the content doesn't help us. as long as we think that we suffer because of the thoughts that we have in our head versus because we're taking those thoughts seriously, then we're constantly in the mode of trying to change our thinking. And I don't need to change my thinking. My thinking will do whatever it does on its own when I don't get involved, right? It's like if it's like a cloudy day outside and I want the clouds to go away, I can swing a baseball bat at the clouds all day. They're not going to move any faster. They're going to do their own thing. And so I let them do their own thing. So that's such a big part of what I do with my clients is they come in with all of these beliefs. I call them SFMs, simple fundamental misunderstandings, not like deep-seated stories that need really deep healing, just like that could be for some things, but for the most part, they're just simple fundamental misunderstandings. It's a thing I picked up from a person or from the media or from a parent or from whatever, and I've just taken that seriously. I've made it a fact instead of slowing down and challenging and questioning what that looks like. So much of this is just like getting people to have a lighter perspective around their thoughts, not taking their thoughts so seriously. That's the core of my work.
And is that through like awareness, like trying to understand the self?
Yeah,
better?
For sure. I mean, there's so many things in here. So there's the first thing about recognizing that you are not your thoughts, right? Yeah. Doing this question of like, who's the one with the problems? That's a huge part of it. But so much of it is that we have been trained that, especially again, if you're like a high performer type A kind of person, which a lot of people that come to me tend to be kind of in that realm, I guess you attract kind of what you are in some aspects, is that you really do think it is your responsibility to take care of everything, right? You need to manage people's experience of you. You need to make sure you don't disappoint them. You don't let them down. What if you do something and they're upset? Like now I'm managing other people's lives on top of everything else. And just this whole notion of like, everything is my responsibility down to what I think is my responsibility. And that's dangerous. If I was literally responsible for everything I thought, that would be a very dangerous way to play the game. So starting to get people to realize that just because there is a thought in your head doesn't mean you have to do something with it. There are some thoughts that are instructional that you should do something with. The other ones you don't need to. And it's to give you kind of an example of this that I thought was really funny and interesting. I'm a huge fan of Gordon Ramsay. I love all the Gordon Ramsay shows. I don't know if you've watched any of them, but like Hell's Kitchen and all these things, right? So one of my good friends is the executive producer of the show. So this year for my birthday in February, he knows I'm a huge fan. He said, we're filming season 21 right now. And if you want, you can come eat dinner in Hell's Kitchen while we're filming and like be there next to Gordon and do all the things. I'm like, of course, that's like dream come true. Fucking sign me up. So I go and I'm sitting there and I'm watching him 20 feet away from him. He's screaming at everybody, yelling, screaming, doing all the things. And I was always really confused because if you watch that show or you watch any kind of kitchen that's doing work at that level, really fast-paced kind of thing, I don't cook. I've never worked in a restaurant, but whoever the expediter or kind of the head chef is, like Gordon in this instance, he gets the tickets, people doing the orders, and he comes and he just screams the order. We need 7 salmons. We need 4 beef Wellingtons. We need 3 mashed potatoes and 7 garnish. He's just screaming all these things. And I'm like, how do they keep track of all this stuff? It's too much. Like it's making me stressed out. And so I was at dinner. I brought somebody with me to the dinner and I was telling them that. I'm like, I don't know how they do it. Well, she knows how kitchens work. I don't know. She goes, well, listen, the people that are in the kitchen, they're only listening for the dish of the station they're on, right? So if I'm on salmon station, I'm just listening for how many salmons. I don't care how many Wellingtons. I don't care how many mashed potatoes. I don't care how many garnish. I'm just listening for the salmon. That's the only one that I can actually do something about, and that's meant for me. And the same thing happens with our thoughts. We have all these things coming at us, all these requests and all these judgments and all these things that are coming at us. And we think we have to do something with all of them, but we don't. There are certain ones that are very purposefully for us. We look at them and we say, there's something I can do with that. That's asking me to step into something. That's asking for something to emerge from within me. It's asking for me to take action. It's asking for me to have that conversation. Whatever that is, listen to that thought. The rest of them, though, they will go away on their own. You don't have to do anything with them. And that's a very uncomfortable thing to start with because we think, no, it's my thought. I got to get rid of the sadness. I got to get rid of the anger. Maybe not. Maybe it's allowed to just be there and it's going to leave on its own if you just leave it alone.
How do we discern the ones that we feel are for us versus the ones that we feel are not for us? Like that's like an intuition, I guess, like a fine line to dance on. Yeah,
it's a very fine line. And the intuition, it's very funny you brought that up. So one of my favorite chapters in my book, and I say it's my favorite chapter because I actually go back and read it for myself the most out of any of the other chapters. It's a chapter called Your Intuition is Drunk. That's literally the name of the chapter. And so the story here is, imagine you have somebody in your life, mentor, friend, coach, partner, whoever it is. And anytime you need anything, you're struggling, you need advice, like whatever it is, you go to them, they drop everything and they're there for you. And they give you great advice and great support and great mentorship. It's amazing. One day you're really in it. You're super stressed out. And of course you're going to go to this person because you know they're always there for you. You walk in their house, you walk into their bedroom, and they are piss drunk on the floor. They're like David Hasselhoff eating a cheeseburger, just like drooling on themselves, just completely laid out. Would you ask that version of that person for advice on what's going on in your world at that time?
Yeah, absolutely not.
Absolutely not. And in fact, you'd probably say, man, this person has always been there for me. They've been so great for me. I think I need to give them a little bit of help now. I think I need to be here to support them, see what they need, give them some water, just sit with them. You can't force them to sober up, but you can sit with them until they naturally sober up. Mm-hmm. And the same thing happens here. The level of trust that we can give to the thoughts in our head is directly related to the level of consciousness that we're at. If our intuition is drunk, then the messages that come in our head are going to be very unkind messages. I don't believe our intuition will ever be unkind with our messages. It may be direct. It may tell you things that are confronting, but it'll never be unkind. So listen to those voices. And if you notice they feel unkind, right? Jason, you're not doing enough. You always do this. You're such a loser. That doesn't feel like intuition. That feels unkind, right? And so I look at myself and I say, is my intuition drunk right now? Am I asking for support from my heart, from my soul, from my intuition when I'm super low on my emotional ladder, right? When I'm essentially drunk. And if it feels that way, then I say, you know what? I'm going to allow myself to sober up, whatever that looks like. It just takes time, maybe some meditation, maybe some movement. And once my consciousness has increased, then I'm going to ask the question of what I need an answer to again from my intuition and see if it's kind and it's instructional or if it's still unkind. Mm-hmm. So the way you differentiate there, it is your intuition, and it's also just looking out for the kindness level of what the voices in your head are saying to you.
That's fascinating. Yeah. Yeah, I always go back and forth with that. It's like, is this intuition or is this fear? Like, which one is it?
It's very hard to tell because they speak the same language. Most of the time they speak the same language, but you can always tell. There's like that little, it's like my mom who does like the passive aggressive Jewish mother thing where she asks a question, but it's really like a statement. It's it's hard to tell sometimes, right? But once you really start to discern that, and you can check in with your body, you'll know, right? Like if you're feeling a lot of stress in your body, that could also be a sign that anything you're getting message wise, any of the narration, probably not good to be trusted fully in that moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it's like I want to believe that like I have my own back.
Yeah,
and it's like, but it's also like the ego's job to make sure that it's always right.
Right.
It's like that's the role of the ego, is like prove how right I am every time.
Exactly.
Right. So it's like if you're coming from a place of fear that something bad may happen or something, and it's like that is your ego talking, then maybe it is gonna like be a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Right.
And it prove itself how right it is. Right? Maybe it, like that feeling is like your worthiness. It's like, I'll prove to you just how unworthy I feel about myself by self-sabotaging maybe a relationship, or maybe in the inability to act from a place of like your best interest, where it's like the healthy choices that you knew you could have been making. Right. But on some fundamental level, you maybe believed that you weren't worthy or lovable, and you behaved in a way that supported that belief.
100%. That goes back to that projection. If you have a projection that you're unlovable, then you will do all the things to prove that you're unlovable, right? And it's kind of like what Gay Hendricks talks about in his book, The Big Leap, the upper limiting problem, right? That a lot of people will get to a level of success and then they'll sabotage themselves. This is why all these lottery winners, they've documented that like win tens of millions of dollars and then they lose it all. It's because they've had a set point their entire life of 30, 40, 50, 60, 70,000 a year, whatever it was. All of a sudden these millions come in out of nowhere, and their set point says, no, we can't deal with all that. That's not what we're used to. We don't know how to deal with that. And so they end up, pissing it away or doing dumb things with it. And so they can get back to their set point. So really starting to tease apart, like, what is the benefit that I'm getting out of sabotaging myself in this way? Because it's not even self-sabotage, it's self-preservation. The challenge is that it's the ego self that we're preserving, and it doesn't need to be preserved.
That's so good. Yeah, I like that distinction there. Because it's like, it's the view of yourself, right, that you always kind of live up to. It's like you don't rise to like the aspiration all the time. It's like oftentimes we kind of fall to our view of our real view of ourselves, like deep down. And you can have these high hopes and talk about how you want to accomplish these things, but if you don't really, like, a larger part of yourself is like, I want to do these things, but I don't really think I'm capable of doing these things. I want to do these things, but you don't deserve that kind of success. Like, getting clear on that and like getting to the root of that is very difficult work, but someone like a coach can help you identify if those exist in you. And oftentimes it comes with language. I'm a huge fan of like understanding the power of words.
Same.
Because they reveal the thoughts that are coming and existing in our heads, right? It's like you can look at somebody and have some assumption of who they are. If somebody's in great shape, you can make the assumption that, okay, this person's disciplined, they're dedicated, they know how to put in work and effort and all these things, but you can't understand why they are that way. Maybe some people, I've learned from my experience as a coach, some people work out because they love themselves. Some people work out because they hate themselves, because the idea of being fat is too hard to live with. Because if they were out of shape, then their whole world would come crumbling down. All of their self-worth would come crumbling down as well. So training because you're working towards improving your health and because it makes you feel good is one side of a coin. The other side is I'm running away from being out of shape.
Yep.
And you can't see that from the outside. But once you start to listen to somebody talk and they start to reveal those thoughts, then you can kind of hear the subtext.
Yeah.
Right?
So what's an example of something you'll hear from somebody who's like really taking good care of their body, but you can tell that it comes from like, and maybe it was part of your own experience in the past, but like, what does that look like?
Yeah. So I'll just speak from my own experience because I, when I first got into working out, I started working out when I was 16 and I can think back to when I was 16, what was I going through? And I was the shortest kid in my class, always every year I was the shortest kid. And again, I prided myself on intellect and like, okay, I'm the shortest, but I'll achieve in these ways that I can control. And then when I started working out, I had started with the intention of like, okay, I might not be able to grow tall, but maybe I'll be able to grow some muscles and that will give me more security or more worth of how I see myself. Because right now I feel short and I feel small, and maybe being bigger will make me feel bigger. So that lens or that like story was always running in the background on some very subtle level. I think there was some great healthy elements of me wanting to, prioritize my health, work on my body, work on my mind, all of these things. But on some very deep level, there was this belief of like, oh, if you're skinny and small, no one will love you. And that was like also a very motivating factor. Yeah. Right. So like, where is the motivation really coming from? Is it coming from running away from something or moving towards something else? It's a subtle but very distinct difference.
Powerful distinction. It's a very powerful distinction. Yeah. And to be able to really recognize that takes a lot of awareness, takes a lot of courage to admit as well.
And sometimes it takes you following through and doing all the things that you think or believe will give you the satisfaction that you've been chasing after your entire life. In my case, it was like, how can I get my body to a place where it's like the ultimate expression of where I can take it? And there's no better place for that than like a bodybuilding stage, right? It's like, this is the craft that I've been, working on for years, and present it polished and tanned and oiled up and in the best poses, and then being categorically judged against other people that, the bodybuilding space is so fast. It has taught me so much. And like, if you get into it because you have low self-worth, it's going to eat you up and chew you out.
I can imagine.
And spit you out. Yeah. And it took me to go through that and to realize, to go all the way to the end of where I could take it, to be like, is this making me happy? Or am I like really like is it making me feel worse? And I had to have a real honest conversation about that, because I could sense where the tides would shift and where I would start to feel bad about myself, no matter how good I looked on stage. And I was like, okay, so there's something deeper here that I need to reconcile or come to realize about myself. And it was that. It was like there was some deep validation that I was seeking out. And once I started to validate myself, then it like dissolved that need and was replaced with this deep appreciation and gratitude for my body, myself, and this understanding that it didn't come from how I looked. It's who I am, and I take care of my body because I really care for it. And that again, that shift was subtle but very, very powerful. But I had to go through it to be on the other side of it.
That's the thing. And as you're saying that, like, I think it's really good to just at least mention that, like, you can't rush anybody's evolution, including your own, right? So I don't think there was anything that would have been valuable for you if I had gone through the exact same thing you went through, and I came to you and said, hey, listen, I know you're just starting to get into bodybuilding, but I just want to warn you about this ahead of time. You'd have been like, sure, old timer. Like, whatever. Right?
Yeah.
I think you still have to have that experience. And I think you proved it perfectly that your soul will get to a point where it's like you were saying earlier too, about like getting hit by the 2x4 with the, from the universe. There's only so long that it'll let you to continue to suffer without awareness. Right. And so at some point the awareness is going to come. So if it hasn't come yet, that's okay. It's fine. For you, it took what it took. Like, it took you getting to the very top of your game before that awareness showed up. And that was the perfect time for it to show up. So anybody who's like worried that like they don't have the level of awareness they think they should have, first of all, if you're listening to this podcast, you're already, 20 steps ahead of anybody who doesn't have awareness. But just like it'll come when it comes, and just be open to seeing it when it shows up.
Yeah, and that's a hard thing to do as a coach. It also is like it's not a hard thing. It's just more of an acquired skill to recognize that and be like, they are where they are. And no amount of like me telling them things will really like do the work for them.
Right.
Like, you have to want to do the work for yourself. And oftentimes you have to experience it for yourself before it really lands.
Yeah.
And the message really lands for them. You can just lovingly guide them the best way you can in the process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've had that where like literally a year or more after I've finished working with somebody, they'll message me and say, I finally got it.
Yeah.
All the things we worked on a year and a half, it finally clicked for me. I'm like, awesome. It happens when it happens.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
Well, Jason, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, bro.
Yeah, it was a really great conversation. I really enjoyed it, and I know that anybody listening also enjoyed it and hopefully got something out of it too. Is there any last words that you like to leave these conversations with?
We're back to me being dead again. Is there any last words? Right in the beginning, it was like, what if I died on the episode? Now I'm giving my last words. Goodness. Last words are just one last little kind of like tool that I would offer, if that's okay. Is I truly believe that anything that we make the center of our universe, we are going to use all of our energy to protect it from failing or falling apart, right? So if you make your business the center of your universe, then all of your energy go. And you may say like, oh no, I want to grow the business. Sure, but you also want to make sure it doesn't fail, right? And so whether it's your relationship or your health or your parenting or your career, whatever it is, anything that I put put as the center of my world, I'm going to use all my energy to protect it from failing or falling apart. And so what I really try to transition into when I'm feeling like overwhelmed or stressed or anxious is to ask myself, what am I making the center of my universe right now? Right? I want to get really clear on what I've now made the most important thing in the world, that it deserves my well-being, my peace to be focusing on. Let's at least give it a name. And let's say it's my business. Then I want to say, cool. What would it look like for me to make just my own experience of peace and ease the center of my universe? That's the only thing. And so I shared that recently on a mastermind with these 40 women, this leadership mastermind. And I shared that exact thing. And this one woman like raises her hand. I said, yeah, what's up? Do you have a question? She goes, yes. So I do that. And that means my kids don't get fed. My husband doesn't feel loved. My work doesn't get done. My clients fire me. And I said, yeah, that's one possibility. The other possibility that I would invite you to consider is that for me, if I know there are responsibilities that I have in the world and I'm not living into those responsibilities, that does not contribute to my peace and ease at all. And so if I'm really focusing on my own peace and ease, then I do that first. And then I want to go give. I want to go serve. I want to feed the kids. I want to take care of my spouse. I want to go do the work that I'm meant to do in the world. So for anybody that feels now or in the future very stressed out about something in particular, ask yourself, what are you making the center of your world, the center of your universe? And ask yourself what it would feel like just for a few minutes to make your own experience of peace and ease the center of your universe.
I love that. I'm going to try that next time.
Do it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, man. Where can we purchase your book?
I'm going to give you a link. I'm going to give you a link so you guys can get a free copy of the book. So free digital, free audio. And if you want a paperback, and if you're in the States, you pay a couple bucks for shipping and handling. I'll ship you a paperback one.
That's awesome.
So I'll give you a link for that so you guys can get that. And on Instagram, I'm at the Jason Goldberg because Jason Goldberg was taken. So I had to get the most pretentious thing possible. So I'm the Jason Goldberg, and I post a bunch of fun stuff over there.
Yeah, I really appreciate your content.
Thank
I
you,
really
man.
Look forward to it. Anytime I see it on my feed, I'm like, I'm going to tap in and like actually listen and not just scroll past.
Thank you, brother.
So,
I appreciate it.
That
means a lot to me. It is. It's actually a huge compliment.
It is.
Thank you
in
for
this
that,
day and
man.
age on Instagram, it is.
It is. I appreciate that. Thanks for having me, man. I love the work
man.
you're doing. Love the human you are. And just, really thank you for having me on.
Well, I'm glad we got to drop in. And this is going to be the first of many. I already know it. So
Thanks
for coming on. And for those listening, if you enjoyed this podcast, please share it. with somebody that you feel may benefit from it, because this is why we have these conversations, is, for our own benefit, because I selfishly really love having guests on like this to pick their brains and see how their mind operates, but also for you all listening and watching here, is because hopefully this provides some value that you can then take and integrate into your life to enhance your life, or maybe experience 5% more joy in your existence. So please share it. It really can make the world of difference for somebody you know. And as always, I appreciate all the engagement, comments, likes, reviews, whatever you feel called to leave. I appreciate you. And as always, I'm sending you all lots of love and light.